Thanks for joining us. I'm Maury Weinstein, President and co-founder of SystemSource, welcoming you today to proactive steps required for cyber insurance claims to be paid in full and to minimize premiums. Quite a mouthful, but important session. Cyber insurance is not so much taken over our lives, but during renewal time, it does occupy us, and it's supposed to let us sleep better at night, but it could work the opposite way also. So let's take a look at it deeply. And if you have topics that you'd like to learn about today, don't hesitate to put those topics in the question box so we can review those topics, make sure they're covered. I do have some notes. When some of you have registered, you did put some notes in, and that helps me gauge the presentation properly. We hope you're enjoying your pizza. And if you haven't received your pizza, do contact Mike Jones at mjones@syssource.com. Mike is actually retiring as our marketing director. This is his last webinar, and we thank you very much, Mike. You've helped all of us learn a lot. Julie Dellinger has joined us as marketing director and is also on the line today. Welcome. So during the webinar, you'll be in presentation mode until the end, and the control panel will allow you to go to full screen mode. That'll be important because there's plenty of data on the graphs today. Use chat or the question box to tell us what you'd like to learn today, and feel free to submit any written questions anytime. We'll cover them probably at the end, but just as you think about them, just type them right in. There'll be an evaluation just after the webinar finishes, and that's how we learn from your feedback. I thought I'd go to commercial for about 15 seconds, and then we'll get right in the meat of our presentation. We use the SystemSource wheel to tell our story, and we go clockwise around the wheel because prospects come to us to help improve their IT operations and also their audiovisual operational maturity. We use our learning center to do that. We have trainers and staff on board. We train about 700 people a month in a variety of topics. There's actually about 3,300 courses open for enrollment at any time on our website. Some of them are sold through others, and some of them are delivered by our own staff. A lot of Power BI going on, a lot of SharePoint, a lot of AI training going on at the moment. Hopefully for lower help desk costs and for higher employee productivity. We use the work of our presentation systems group. This is about a dozen people who just think about auditoriums, classrooms, presentation rooms of all sorts, largely centered around Teams these days. Consulting is where we keep our heavy hitters. These folks do our cloud migrations, all of our security assessments, all of our on-premise migrations, all of that is done in our consulting forces. Cloud services is code word for our data center. We've been running a data center in Hunt Valley since '95. So we took our cloud blinders off many years ago. Much of our current work, of course, is being done at AWS and Azure. Service and support can be done two different directions. One is reactively, when you call us when it all falls apart, and hopefully that will never happen. Very difficult way of operating both on our side and yours. But managed services is the hot topic of the decade, and that is where we offer to maintain your environment with proactive services. If we do that efficiently enough, there may be enough money left over in the budgets to purchase new equipment and to refresh the environments from time to time. We use our configuration center and warehouse here in our Hunt Valley headquarters to do so. That's SystemSource today. On behalf of the 70 of us at SystemSource, we say thanks for coming. If you haven't been to our computer museum, it is a fun trip, and we have a very substantial computer museum, over 1,000 artifacts available for viewing. And the National Electronics Museum has just relocated and has just reopened within our facility. I hope you'll enjoy the museum tour someday. Our IT management seminar series is composed of lots of different pieces beyond what you're seeing here today, which is the proactive steps required for cyber insurance. So we have lots of other sessions. Hopefully you've enjoyed a few in the past, including Verizon's analysis of security incidents, reducing your IT costs, learning from our 167,000 completed IT support tickets, and so on. Do keep an eye on your email screen or the front of our webpage. Always lists the next webinars. This is the last webinar of the year. So thanks for joining us this year. We'll pick up back in January. So there's nothing on our webpage at the moment, but we'll pick back up very shortly. Our agenda today is understanding your security exposure, how insurance firms see your exposure, finding your security comfort level, including at home, and the important question is who's going to do all this work. So that's our agenda today, and let's jump right in. One of the things I think about is management messaging, making sure that messages we send to our staff as managers are interpretable, are actionable. And one of the messages we could send is what alert status are we in today? And the first step to approaching a very difficult issue like security is to write down where we are and be honest about it. So we started off here internally at red alert. Now, you can't run an organization in red alert forever. It's very difficult. You've got to have eyes in the back of your head and so on. So we're now at yellow alert. But it's very important to communicate that message, whatever alert level you're on, to make sure that management understands what it is and the staff understands also. Based on my 43 years in IT management, IT security risks, I think, would be cut in half instantly if every IT manager or CFO, CXO asked for 4 numbers in addition to checking IT services vendor performance once a quarter. These are the 4 numbers right in front of you. You can change them to your own, using your own experience. Percentages of patches installed, percent using 2FA, phish-prone percentage, and backup completion percentage. Those are my 4. And the theory behind today's presentation and why it may be worth an hour to focus on it is I think that there is something we can do, and it may be easier than we think. Those are the 4 that I've credited to cutting in half instantly security exposure. And you'll see that wound through today's presentation. First, we have to understand our security exposure. So I want to define it first. Something very simply, big picture, is the overall risk that our organizations incur minus what we insure for, right? Because that becomes someone else's problem at a fee, minus whatever risk reduction efforts we get involved with. So those are that's a very bigger picture look at your security exposure. Overall risk, less insurance, less risk reduction. And our job together is to formally list these risks and, of course, a plan for each one of them. That plan could include really anything, but they usually fall in 3 categories. One is I want to insure that risk. I want to let somebody else incur that risk for a fee. Number 2 is to assume the risk that the organization feels comfortable at a management or board level, assuming whatever risk you're listing. Or let's reduce the risk. Plenty of avenues to do that, sometimes not a lot of money involved. But I worry a lot about risks that we know about, or should know about, that don't fall in one of these 3 categories. Today we're talking about really number 1 and 3. They go hand in hand. So our job together is to help secure cyber insurance, the terms, understanding the terms and the limits. Then to prep the security metrics, at least for the insurance requirements, if not more. You may have regulatory needs or board of director requirements or whatever. So to prep those security measurements and to make sure they stay in place. Now, we know that renewals after a claim has been made are not easy. Disruptive would be a nice word for that. Higher deductibles, higher premiums, lower coverage limits, they're all in your future unless we work on managing the risk together. So I've seen, we've been involved in at least 5-ish major recoveries among non-fully managed clients, of course. We haven't lost a fully managed client to ransomware in perhaps forever. It's outside my memory. But among those that are not managed, we've been involved in some very difficult restorations, all been successful, but not easy. All requiring around the clock, multi-million-dollar efforts. These are substantial recoveries with substantial firms. And usually I talk to the CFO after the recovery, after the claim is paid, whatever, and he or she tells me a bad story, maybe hiding a few more details than they should about the renewal. That's the insurance renewal. Some of them say, well, we chose not to renew. That's another way of saying, of course, that the deductibles were too high, premiums were too high, and the limits were too low after a loss. So we really need to avoid that scenario for obvious reasons. So what are the insurance companies doing? One could say to us or for us or whatever, or to enrich their bottom line. One is Lloyd's of London, which all of you have heard before, for all renewals after March of 2023, put this paragraph in. This is the actual paragraph. We're requiring all standalone cyber attack policies must include, unless agreed otherwise, a clause excluding liability for losses arising out of any state-backed cyber attack. So there's a fairly large exclusion that was put in place some years ago. I don't know if any of the other insurance companies have joined them, but Lloyd's, does quite a bit of insurance or reinsurance in this area. So we've got to keep an eye on that. Active war risk is very much out there, and Lloyd's is putting it back on you with this clause. Now, one of the ways of understanding your security exposure is to establish a dashboard. Our managed clients receive a quick glance dashboard for security. It's about 66 lines long. You're looking at about a dozen lines of it right here. It's a much longer dashboard that turns into a spreadsheet, turns into a dashboard. It has lights in the middle of it indicating where we are. So over time, as we meet with our managed clients 4 times a year or whatever the number is, we can actually see if these lights are progressing toward green. No client has gotten them all green, at least on our security quick glance. On our infrastructure quick glance, 1 or 2 clients are all green. You can see the prevalent and the importance of 2FA right here. There's about 4 lines right in front of you that indicate 2FA. It turns out that the current quick glance dashboard has many more lines than that. So you can see progress over time. And for those of you who manage based on lights on your desk, it's a very strong management technique, is to run toward lights that are red, keep an eye on lights that are yellow, and be happy about the lights that we've turned green. If that's your management technique, these quick glance dashboards are very helpful, both to see progress. And of course, there is a board version of this also in case you have to present on security to upper management or the board of directors level. I've done that personally for some of our clients, and this dashboard comes in handy in presenting those thoughts quickly. How insurance firm rates your exposure? Well, one of the things we rely on is Judy Morrison. Judy is head of Schoenfeld Insurance. Schoenfeld is our insurance firm for decades, and I can vouch for them. Every other session, we have Judy come in to update us on what insurance firms are thinking. I don't have access to the insurance firms, at least to the underwriters. These are the folks that know everything. They've got all the data, and you and I have very little. So that's why we turn to Judy in order to access this information. So one of the things that we also keep an eye on is in social media, at Reddit and other places, there are people who have a lot of experience, a lot more experience than you and I have in cyber insurance. This person wrote, insurance is driven largely by historical data. This is a person who actually built an insurance rater a few years back. He or she says, I got to really know how the sausage is made. 3 primary sources for that historical data. 1, the application underwriting forms. Those are the forms that you're familiar with that change each year. Some of them are some of the questions are a little bizarre. Number 2 is the claims loss data. That's the history, and we talked about that a moment ago as far as renewals go. And 3 is external vulnerability scans. We'll take a quick look at that in a moment, but know that pretty much uniformly on renewal or when the insurance policies are written for the first time, that your insurance vendor will run external vulnerability scans against your environment. And they may even give you the results. So those are the 3 primary sources on how insurance is cooked, how the sausage is made, told by some Reddit listing I can't vouch for, but it seems to be pretty accurate. Here comes the insurance form. That's something you're more familiar with than ever. This happens to be the traveler's underwriting form. Some of the questions are fairly hard to interpret. We actually had to get in the face of underwriters just to understand them for our own policy. When I see a flat list of security stuff like this one, I always ask the question, what's really important? Where's the 80-20 rule? And unfortunately, other than using the Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report, which is the subject of one of our webinars or several of our webinars each year, and maybe the incident response folks, only the insurance companies have the real data that we can learn from. So that's why these forums hopefully are based on that real data and do direct us in the right direction to improve our security in our environments. Travelers also has a separate form called multi-factor authentication attestation, where you have to attest to a number of uses of MFA. In fact, there's quite a few of them. This is all MFA in one page: internal, remote access, and so on. Judy's insurance notes, when we asked Judy to ask the underwriters what really makes an impact on the rates and the overall security, which should be the same thing. You would hope that the rates and the underlying security are proportional to each other. These are the notes she came back with. The insurance company would love to see an incident response plan, MFA, patch management, EDR, external vulnerability scan, and so on. We're going to go through each one of these to see where we are against what Judy has found from the underwriters as being important. Remember, only they have the data along with Verizon and a few other people. So we really have to listen closely to them. It's not our MO to listen closely to our cyber insurance firms, but they understand every loss, the amounts, the source, and so on. So we put together this chart here internally many years ago. This chart is a list of various security solutions, and your job and my job together is to figure out what your organization's comfort level is. Which one of these is important to your organization? If you were running Schwab or Fidelity or your favorite firm, Vanguard, whatever, you would probably change the security dial to full blast. When you're managing $6 trillion each firm of other people's money, you've got to have security fully tightened down and a budget of many hundreds of millions of dollars a year to support that. But not everyone is a Vanguard, Schwab, or Fidelity. So you've got to figure out what your security comfort level is. Our managed clients do it in conjunction with us, and then figure out what solutions are needed to maintain that security comfort level. I was wondering whether this chart, which I created years ago, had any validity to it. Just because I wrote it down doesn't mean it has any validity. But you can see with these little notepads that these are the ones that the insurance firms have confirmed to be important, based on Judy's notes we saw a moment ago, including 2FA, including external scans, and so on. So I felt more comfortable when I correlated this with what the insurance companies were telling us. Now, there are different versions of this. This one is my basics solution list. And again, you have to figure out what your comfort level is and figure out what pieces of this you want your organization to incur. Basics means when you wake up in the morning, if you don't have the yellows covered, it could be a very bad day. I can't guarantee what day it's going to be a bad day, but there's a probability you're going to have some bad days. So that's why we call it basics. And in yellow, we have just the barest security pieces. But unfortunately, not every customer have these in place at 100% level, and that's why I bring it to your attention. There's another version of this chart called for those that don't have deep budgets. We respect our customers' budgets, but security doesn't have to be expensive. So we created a version of this chart and highlighted in green those solutions under $1 a month per user. Now, this does assume that you've got a reasonable Microsoft licensing, like Business Premium or better. There is an assumption here. 2FA doesn't have to be expensive. Disk encryption, of course, doesn't have to be expensive. Conditional access is part of Business Premium, and so on. So much of this chart, including some of the basics, is under $1 a month per user. Third version of the chart. For those that are interested in us managing your IT or a portion of your IT, I wondered one day what is in scope in our managed services scope. And the blue that you see in front of you, assuming you have the right Microsoft licensing, the mid-level licensing, is in scope for managed services. So again, I just wanted to see, are we covering the right items? And that's what the blue items, which is the vast portion of it. Now, at System Source, we always have something in research. Down the bottom of the page, you can see we're researching the KnowBe4 password IQ and Defender coexistence and passkeys, and there's always plenty going on in the labs in the back office here. The fourth and last one is comfort level at home. In red are the emphasis items for those that we need to spend more time on, for those that are computing at home, for those that are remote users. So patch management is a bit of a lost art for those that are remote unless you have the right tools. Self-service password reset is an important one because for people who are working remotely, when you call me to reset your password, how do I know it's you? It could be anybody. Conditional access is very important as people come in through the firewall to make sure that we understand who's in our networks. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but the red ones are more important than the other ones when computing at home. Of course, you'll receive a copy of the deck today so you can take a look at your own work versus these charts. Judy has told us a lot about incident response plans. The insurance companies have noted this to be a positive and could be a decrease on your rates. In this case, incident response plans can take a lot of forms. One of the things we do after there's an incident, especially if it's a email incursion, is to make sure we look, for example, at the rules that the hackers leave behind. Those rules are great breadcrumbs to figure out where the loss is going to happen. So in this case, the hacker, these are real life stories among our clients right in front of you. I'm obviously protecting their names. In this case, the word ADP is probably going to be the path of the fraud, because the hackers have left behind a rule that says anything with ADP in the subject or body, delete the message, right? All of you are familiar with this. But having those rules and looking at them before you remove them means that we can understand the path of the fraud. That should help us keep the losses down. So that's just that's sort of a mini incident response plan, but very important. When you have an email incursion, an incident, we have a 16-step process that we use to keep the hackers out, including simple things like obviously changing passwords, but there's plenty more behind it. There's 15 other steps, one of which is to capture the rules. Now, we have a fixed price offer here at System Source. If you ever want it, some of you have already done this work. It's an incident response plan for the first 24 hours. Why did I choose 24 hours? Some of you know the answer to that question. After 24 hours or 36 hours potentially, your insurance firm will bring in an IR firm, an incident response firm of their own choosing. Some of these firms are fairly talented. Some of them can mobilize, a fairly significant resources, although compared to our resources, they're usually coming in from out of state, and so they make heavy use of our people too. I've never tried an incident response without our people, so I couldn't comment on that, how well these guys handle it without a local provider like us. But there is an incident response plan opportunity for the first 24 hours before the incident response folks get involved. After that, anything I do for you or you do for yourself is sort of out the window, at least from a IT point of view. From an operations point of view, of course, having an incident response program and plan is very important for ops to keep your operations going. But from an IT point of view, the incident response firms take over at 24 hours or 36, of course, with a $100,000 retainer minimum. And so that's why our scope of our incident response plan is just for the first 24 hours. I've labeled some of the pieces that we go through in our planning process. In MFA, I think all of you know the importance of MFA. This is just one example. This was a nonprofit, international nonprofit, and a manager's account were hacked. They watched her emails for financial transactions so they can figure out how the transactions proceed through their systems. They created a fake invoice, oddly enough, from their ex-IT provider and forwarded to her account. They filled out the required form. They forwarded to accounting, and accounting paid 5 figures. So this goes on every day in Baltimore and throughout the country. Our job is to prevent it. MFA would have slowed the hackers down for sure, so they couldn't get into the manager's account. I'll actually show you some documentation that actually shows that it actually works when you put MFA and some of the other pieces in place. We'll show you some of our internal data in just a moment. Patch management and end-of-life software removal, a difficult area, but an area we must pay attention to. Here's why. This is the actual Chubb provisions. Chubb, is one of the major cyber insurance providers. Chubb is providing policyholders with what they call a 45-day grace period. A grace period is a nice way of saying they're going to reduce your claim by half at 45 days if the patch was not applied that opened the vulnerability. And they're going to reduce that claim by 75% at 90 days behind. So this is actual policy information. Now, this lends a lot of heat and credence to making sure our patches are in effect and we're patching properly. Here's an example of a customer. This one actually hit the newspapers, but I'll not use their name anyway. But in the healthcare area, there were infected systems. There was a ransomware incident. So when they checked to see what happened, incomplete patching was noted. Some PCs were not requesting needed patches, and nobody must have been reporting on it, otherwise they would have seen it. Some of the vendors weren't patching. There were some vendor PCs, including time clocks and displays and medical equipment and so on. Some of the operating systems versions were frozen because of incompatibilities. The source was traced back to one of their parent companies, which was a large hospital here in town. Over 200 computers needed to be replaced. In this case, they were actually replaced because they were so old. So this is a story you've heard a number of times, but when you see it up close and personal, it's not pretty. But that begs the question, why is patching so complicated? Why can't we get on top of this issue? And the answer is, when we write down the number of ways to patch, look at the number. It's about 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 9 different ways to patch. No wonder it's so complicated and difficult. But yet still important. Why Microsoft created different build paths, upgrade paths for 4 different pieces of their product line. There's a big question mark there. However, it still remains very important, but difficult to do well. This is data from the latest Verizon data breach report. This notes that the data shows that at 55 days, half of the vulnerabilities are still unremediated. 55 days. Now you could say, well, 55 days goes by pretty fast. Enterprise software takes a while to test before you patch it, whatever. And all that is true, except the hackers are giving you 5 days. So for the known exploited vulnerabilities, that's KEVs, the days until first scan is 5 days. So the hackers are giving you 5 days on the known exploited vulnerabilities, and these known exploited vulnerabilities are not being patched more than half in 55 days. So now you can start to see why the hackers can have a field day in our environments. Now, make sure that I mentioned early on that if IT managers and CXOs ask for 4 pieces of information, one of those 4 is right in front of you. That's the patch score. Our patch scores, at least for Microsoft, are in the mid-90s generally. Now, we know the patching is a lost art, and of course, it's very boring work. We know that because we test our customer environments for patch scores on onboarding, during onboarding. 35% is roughly the highest score we've ever seen, even with patch scores coming in from other managed services providers. Now, in a couple weeks, we can take that in the mid-90s and hold it there, but it's a bit of a lost art. I also mentioned evidence. One of the 4 questions that would reduce security incidents in half, in my estimation, is tracking and understanding what percentage of backup completions, successful completions in the past week or month or whatever period you want to use. So we furnish our managed customers a spreadsheet, a little tiny piece of what you see in front of you, that shows the status of every job every day. So while you and I are sleeping in the morning, our staff is hard at work looking at the backup jobs. This is a little tiny snippet of a spreadsheet that's probably 800 lines long, but it's very important to do that. Otherwise, you can pretty much predict that the backups are not going to be there when you need them. EDR comes up in Judy's hot list as assembled by the insurance underwriters. The EDR I'm talking about is endpoint detection and response. Our standard is semantic SCSC, but there's plenty of other ones around, including CrowdStrike, unfortunately, which caused tremendous furor earlier in the year. External vulnerability scans are important. I hope all of us are running external vulnerability scans. They are in scope for our managed clients and not particularly hard or expensive to do for non-managed clients. There is an interesting data point. This data point comes from March 2020, so I can't vouch that it's true as of last month. But BitSight Technologies, which is actually one of the large external vulnerability scanners that does a lot of work for the insurance companies. Remember, I said earlier that insurance companies will use these scans to help price your policy. So this shows malware on home networks used by employees working remotely versus the corresponding corporate networks of the same employer. So this is home networks versus the corporate networks of the same employer. In nearly every case, the specific malware was way more prevalent on the home network. For example, TrickBot, which is right here, an infection often precedes ransomware, was on home networks at 3.8x the rate of corresponding corporate networks. So partly because we're not patching as well at home as we do in the office, and partly for other reasons, lots of other reasons. We may be having DNS filtering going on at the office but not at home. There's lots of other reasons for this, but the infections are much higher at home. Backups. We talked about backups a little bit, but I'm going to promote to you, encourage you to check that your backups are immutable. If you haven't checked and you want us to check, of course, just open a ticket or call in, and we'd be happy to help you. Immutable backups means your data is unchangeable and can't be deleted during the defined immutability period. The hackers love to either ransomware or whatever your environment, and then ransomware your backups also. They love that, because it encourages you, of course, to pay the ransom. We need to prevent that. So because immutable backups can't be changed or deleted, they're a very significant component we've found in our ransomware recovery. If you get nothing else out of today's presentation, which is why I put it in yellow above, make sure your SAN snapshots are working properly and that they're set up. SAN snapshots produce a very much clearer path, much more direct path to ransomware recovery. But if you haven't set them up ahead of time, of course, it doesn't work. Callback verification is important to the insurance companies. The underwriters tell us that. This is where we independently verify when a transfer, change, or request comes in from a vendor. I want to change my bank account number, the vendor says. Please use this in the future. We must verify that request. How do we do it? We call back on an independent verification, not using any information that came up in that email. This is driven by a surge in social engineering claims. Some insurance companies do require you to have a transfer policy. So their cyber insurance clause doesn't even apply unless you follow the funds transfer policy. That requires regular training. Some of them require you to follow the policy, and some of them require you to have a policy. Just depends on which insurance company it is. 4 out of 5 insurance that we surveyed have a callback requirement of some type, either to pay the claim or to actually get the policy written. If you don't have a funds transfer policy, sort of your last line of defense, just note that in today's evaluation, we'll send you, there was a law firm that actually, we got permission to use a funds transfer policy that they created for their clients. We'd be happy to send that to you. In social engineering, this is high up on the hit parade for underwriters to evaluate in each of our environments. This is an internal data graph because we don't believe in any of our manufacturers' data. We created our own data set of phish-prone percentage. This uses the KnowBe4 phishing and training campaigns. Nearly everybody using KnowBe4, or really any of your and whatever you're using for your phishing campaigns and training, started around 20, 21, 22, 23%. About 1 in 5 emails, phishing emails that come in will be clicked by one of your folks. That's pretty scary. The good news is when you turn on and you configure KnowBe4 or whatever you're using properly, and I emphasize properly, turns out that KnowBe4 and this other stuff that you have, Fishline from Barracuda or whatever, is actually fairly worthless unless you configure it properly. I've been somewhat amazed and surprised by that. So in any case, if you configure it properly with the proper frequency, with the proper notifications to management and so on, that issue where 1 in 5 phishing emails are clicked by your staff goes into the noise and stays there quickly. Now, hiring new people, of course, brings on some peaks. If you change the training template to make it more rigorous or to use AI in picking the template like you can do with KnowBe4, that obviously creates its own peak. But it settles down pretty quickly. Can you imagine if all business problems could be solved like this quickly for $2 a month per person or whatever these things cost? It's pretty impressive. This particular data set actually has quite a few zeros along the way. You can actually see that. So that in those weekly phishing campaigns, nobody clicked at all. The other internal data I have for you today is fraudulent 365 logins. To have the hackers in your accounts, especially if they're persistent over a long period of time, is absolutely hazardous. All of you know that. And we used to see this about 10 per quarter. This is the Q4 2021 fraudulent logins. But using a mixture of better licensing, a better KnowBe4 setup, lots of different pieces, we've been able to take this number down, and it's almost in the noise at this point. There was actually 8 months here for which there were no fraudulent logins among the thousands of mailboxes that we protect, many thousands. So hopefully we'll be able to take this to 0 permanently. We're not there yet. I think Q4 might have gone to 2 for this quarter. One of our clients' executives gave up his credentials and didn't tell us for a couple weeks. This does beg the question, who's going to do all this work? Plenty of work to do. This is actually the Gartner model called Run, Grow, and Transform. Gartner is the father of IT research in the IT industry. And they lend us this model, which they call Run, Grow, and Transform. What they remind us is that not all IT tasks are created equal. Gartner says, take each task and plot it on this chart where the x-axis is competitive advantage and the y-axis is business knowledge. Business knowledge means how intimate with your environment, how well do I have to know your environment to execute whatever task we're putting on here, and how much competitive advantage does that task give you? So for example, if you're creating an ERP system for your organization, that's up here someplace. Lots of business knowledge needed, and if you do it properly, it's going to give you lots of competitive advantage. Or if you put in Salesforce or whatever. But if you're looking to administer your 365 portal, check your backups, perform help desk, whatever, those tasks are down here in the bottom left-hand corner. They don't give you as much competitive advantage, and they don't need as much business intimacy. We don't have to understand your environment as well to do that work. So different tasks go on a different part of the Run, Grow, Transform model. And then Gartner overlays it and says, these tasks right here, remember ERP? Those you own. Those are yours. Those are transform activities. Your grow activities, which are the activities needed to grow your firm at the standard 10, 11, 12% a year, you partner. Some you do yourself and some you send out, outsource. Down here in the bottom left-hand corner, Gartner says, those are the run activities, you outsource those. And that's much of the work we do in our managed services area. I would note a couple more interesting things about Gartner's model, one of which is, while management is very interested in the upper right-hand corner, they're probably calling you all day long, asking for a status of whatever project you're working on, the people and the money is tied up in the bottom left-hand corner. That dichotomy can drive us crazy. And if some of you feel these pressures over time where much of the effort in the upper right-hand corner is very visible, and the bottom left-hand corner carries all the risk and people and salaries and expenses and tool sets and so on. That dichotomy is very difficult to handle. The other interesting things about this model is that the lower left-hand corner, that's the run area, is about, let me check my notes, it's about 65% of overall IT spending is in run activities. You would hope that that number drops over the years as we become more efficient. Turns out it doesn't. That number, which actually is fairly close across industries, doesn't drop very much. Some management experts say our ability to compress run activities and to reduce that 65% is key because that frees up money to do the transform activities. An example of a transform activity might be if you're a lumber yard and you become a e-commerce lumber yard. If you're a credit union and you become an online credit union. Those are transform activities where you're transforming your business. So those are the interesting pieces that Gartner lends us. And we can go right to summary of today's presentation by saying that our role is to educate management on the risks assumed versus what's insured. We can't have risks that are sort of hanging out there, unknown. No one knows whether we should insure for them because they're hidden. Get an early start on the renewal for your insurance or you're writing your first policy. We do still have a few customers who don't have cyber insurance, just a small number. By asking for the attestation form, the security questionnaire, they love to drop these forms in your lap just before renewal. Go ahead and ask for early renewal so that you have time to handle these forms and to improve your security if you need to. One of the things we did recently for one of our larger clients, maybe 2,600 people, maybe 800 full-time, something like that. The insurance folks said, you've got to have better antivirus, and they gave them like 20 days to do it. Well, 20 days is not easy in a 2,600 person environment. So getting an early start prevents those kinds of fires. Reach out to us or somebody if for insurance or IT assistance if you're stretched internally. And manage to the insurance requirements. Once you commit to them, make sure they stay in place all year long. That's the role of the dashboards that you saw earlier. I've asked Michelle Robinson, who runs our Learning Center, to throw some security courses in today's presentation. Michelle does a lot of work with KnowBe4, and we do have a lot of security courses running from CISSPs through the Microsoft and so on. So don't hesitate to take a look at this. She has provided some discounts on some courses on the right-hand side. And of course, this will be in today's deck and packet that you'll receive later on this afternoon. Don't hesitate to ask about IT. A reminder to complete the survey at the end of the seminar. We'll use your feedback to help us improve. And of course, a random winner will be generated from the completed surveys for a gift certificate. And thanks for coming today. I'll be quiet for a moment, and you're welcome to throw questions in the question box. While you're thinking about today's presentation and any questions, of course, any work that you've done that might lend itself to letting me know and all of us know whether some of this stuff that you've tried worked or didn't work. Those are valuable thoughts also. When you registered, you did put some notes in about what you'd like to learn today. I'm going to use your first name only just to protect the innocent. Bo, thanks for joining us today. You noted better security. I hope you saw something here today. Of course, we have sessions that are more targeted toward security. Today's was mostly what's needed to hold cyber insurance premiums down and to keep our cyber insurance companies interested. Michelle, thanks for joining us. Understanding your security exposure, I hope you got a better picture of that and understand where we open today's presentation, and that security exposure has 3 legs to it. The legs are right in front of you on bullet 1, which is overall risk, less what we insured for, less what we reduced. So that's sort of the big picture to start thinking about understanding security exposure. All have to be known. Asia, thanks for joining us. How insurance companies rate your exposure. I hope you saw that today. And thanks to Judy Morrison for putting together this list, which you can see right in front of you. So this is from the mouth of the insurance underwriters. These are the people with all the data, and of course, they're the ones setting the premiums also. I thought getting in their face would be an important part of today's presentation. Shadi, thanks for joining us. Cyber insurance, you've noted. Hope you got what you came for today. Michael, thanks for joining us. Cyber security measures. As you know, we like measures here at System Source. We measure everything we do. Don't hesitate to chime in through the question box if you have certain measurements that have been powerful or vice versa, not powerful in your work. Butch, thanks for joining us today. Ways to make cyber insurance cheaper. Following some of the model that Judy's noted, and that's right on your screen, does enable the underwriters to reduce pricing. Of course, making sure that you don't have any claims is an important part of that. Bavara, thanks for joining us today. All topics in the agenda look interesting. I hope so. And that's, I think I've covered all the notes for anyone who's put notes in. Other thoughts for today, don't hesitate to put them in the question box or the chat box, whatever's in front of you. They say the biggest gift that business persons can give each other is a shorter meeting. So I'm going to yield the 15 minutes back to you, or 10 minutes back to you in today's hour. And I appreciate you joining us very much. Thank you.